today. We're so excited for you all to be here. So just a little bit of background information. This is the first workshop in the free series of Diversifying the Journalism, which aims to help youth deepen their commitment to justice and advocacy via different avenues of self-expression, particularly through journalism and artistic mediums. And throughout this series, we'll explore what it means to manifest justice across various topics, find the words to write about pressing human rights issues, and empower ourselves and others by sharing our voices. So the May topic is education reform, which I'm so excited about. Yeah, and to start us off, we have a keynote speaker, Endia Griffin. So Endia is a USC student, journalist, and educator based in LA who is currently studying visual anthropology and journalism with a concentration in voice, justice, and advocacy. And she's partnered with organizations like TED, Teen Vogue, and Big Picture Learning for collective liberation through education. So without any further ado, go ahead and take us away, Endia.
Okay, so I entitled the presentation Shaping the Narrative, Storytelling as a Tool for Change, which I'm sure is a topic y'all be discussing throughout the entirety of this program. I had a slide to talk about myself a bit, but since I've already been introduced, I'll go ahead and skip that. And so I'll just get into my journey as a journalist. So the first time I ever kind of envisioned myself as a journalist was through this program that I participated in at a local nonprofit. I'm from San Diego. And so it was basically this program called Speak City Heights Youth Media, where we would be community journalists as youth, and we would tell stories about the people within our communities and different topics that were interesting to us. And so the first story that I ever wrote as a journalist was called Immigrant Youth Fashion, Fitting In to Stand Out. And it was about how youth within this community called City Heights, which was a highly refugee and immigrant community, how they would use popular culture and the traditions of their home cultures and blend those together to both fit in and stand out within their communities and as youth. And so that story ended up being picked up by NPR's Why Our Media, which is this youth journalism publication, and it really ignited this passion in me for telling stories through journalism. I'd always been passionate about storytelling in general, but now I knew that I could be a journalist, even as I believe I was 15 when I did that. And so after being a part of that movement, or having the opportunity to do that program, I was contacted further by NPR and Wire Media to do some coverage about the gun violence walkout, which I believe was 2018 that we did this. It was the anniversary of Parkland. And so I got the opportunity to document that movement on my campus, getting quotes from different activists on my campus that were involved in organizing it. It was a really amazing opportunity to connect with different storytellers across the nation. And actually being a part of Speak City Heights and Wire Media, I got the opportunity to go to 2 different conferences in Oakland that were run by the California Endowment, where we got the opportunity to network with journalists across the state to see what work they were doing, mostly centered around justice. So that was a really amazing opportunity. And the first learning that I had from those opportunities was that you should always fight for your voice. After I did those first 2 stories with Wire Media, I ended up doing, I think, 2 more. And one of the ones that came right before the one that I'm about to speak about, I didn't really like how it ended up turning out. It was another story kind of about first generation youth. And they wanted me to essentially make the same story again with new people. And so as I was writing it, I tried to kind of shape the narrative to what I wanted it to look like, which was basically an exploration of how the cultural values of these different youth's backgrounds would influence the way that they interact in daily life. And so when I went to my editor, she kind of had a different idea of what she wanted it to look like. And so I ended up not publishing with them. And what I learned from that experience was that you should always fight for your voice, and that anything that you publish with your name on it is going to stand for what you do in your career. And if you don't like something, or if you don't agree with a work that's trying to be published with your name on it, you shouldn't publish, or you should take it elsewhere. So that was my learning number one. And feel free to ask any questions throughout. I'm going to be putting like, I think there's like 5 learnings. And like, yeah, if you have questions, go ahead. So the next story that I ended up actually publishing with them was called "I Like Your Hair Better Straight." It was a mix between like reportage and a personal essay. It was about when California passed the hair discrimination ban. And so I wrote about my personal journey with natural hair, and I also wrote about kind of like that movement at large. And what that opportunity taught me is that you can insert your experiences into your stories. I think a lot of the time we envision journalism as this thing that's like completely objective, and like if you're in it, then it's not objective, and your perspective is not what's important. It should be about kind of looking at everything from the outside. But participating in that story really gave me the opportunity to see how my life and my experiences could fold into journalism as a whole. And I also realized that I said, of course, you can ask questions throughout, but I can't actually see the chat. So if the moderators could help me out if someone has a question, that would be great. Okay, and so the next year, I participated in the iteration of Speak City Heights Youth Media again. In the second story that I wrote for that program is called "One Artivist's Fight Against Gentrification," and it was a story about this artist photographer in the City Heights community who was using photography as a way to preserve the City Heights community as it was being gentrified, and like documenting the people and the places and the things that really made the community what it was. And so that was a really amazing opportunity to write a feature story on an activist in the community that was doing some really amazing work. And then also I got to backlight that with the political aspects of why City House was being gentrified. I think that is a really good balance to get like a personal interest in there and then also have your political story as well. That's something that I like to do when I'm working on these stories, just to show the human impact of them. But that story taught me that I needed to be flexible. So originally, I believe the story was supposed to be about highlighting artists within the City Heights community at large. And it wasn't actually about gentrification from the beginning, but a lot of the people that I was trying to interview ended up falling through, and the leads weren't exactly what I thought they would be once I started interviewing people sometimes. And so that's my third learning about journalism, is that you have to be flexible and always be willing to shape your narrative, but also let your narrative shape you in your practices. And so the next thing, I think I'm going chronologically here, but this is another opportunity where I got to cover something that was happening on my campus, my high school campus, and that was the climate justice walkout. So this one, it wasn't really a story. I mostly just did like documentation. So taking photographs and doing like audio work with that opportunity. And it was really just like a cool thing to see that other youth were really honing their power through their voices in ways that didn't necessarily need to be written about, that we could just listen to their voices and feel that power. So I'm sure throughout this program, you'll be introduced to many ways of sharing stories. And that was just one that I really enjoyed. And then here I kind of got into a program that's similar, I guess, to what we're doing, what y'all are doing here. And it was called the Student Voice Journalism Fellowship. And so we worked alongside a community of like fellow student journalists. And we made stories. They were all about education reform. So it seems like y'all have different themes for different months, but like all of our stories were about education reform. And so the first story that I wrote with them was called Silent in the Face of Oppression, a story of cultural incompetence in American schools. So essentially I wrote about like segregation, residential segregation and school segregation throughout the United States, as well as the disparities of people of color within the teaching workforce, and how that manifests in cultural incompetence in schools that ultimately harms students of color and white students as well. And so these are 3 different stories that I ended up writing throughout that fellowship. And what I wanted to do here, why they're like on phones, is because I also was introduced to, like, right after I wrote that story, I believe I went back to the conference, the Youth Media Conference in California, and we did this workshop on social media storytelling. So I kind of wanted to show y'all how I adapted the story to a different platform through Instagram, and kind of made like an Instagram story series about the like written digital journalism, to make it a little bit more bite-sized and manageable. So this is the first time that I did it. And then I tried it again because it seemed to be pretty successful, and improved my skills a bit in terms of the design and things like that. But ultimately, um, yeah, I kind of just made a practice out of doing that with my stories, as a way to get more attention to the story, and then also to like learn how you can communicate um, in different ways. And so that leads me to my next tip, or my next learning, is that to experiment with different mediums. Like, as you develop stories, try adapting them to platforms like social media, podcasting, video, etc., and to determine how you tell stories best, and how stories will translate best. Because some stories are better in a video medium, or they're better just as a photo essay. But if you focus only on writing, then you might not ever learn that you could have told the story in a more interesting way. So the next thing I want to get into, is that kind of as that fellowship was coming to an end, I was still working with the organization Student Voice. And this was like amidst the test optional movement, in the spring of 2020, that like universities were considering like going test optional for their upcoming application cycles, because so many students didn't have access to the testing facilities that they would have needed, like juniors, I think, at the time. And so it began this fight for ending standardized testing in college admissions, like, period. And so I ended up writing this piece for Teen Vogue about going test optional. I was actually a part of like a press corps that we were developing stories for different publications about this test optional movement, so we could really spread our message. And yeah, one of the articles that ended up being written was this one for that I ended up pitching to Teen Vogue. Um, and that was my learning number 5, is to pitch, pitch, pitch. Like, we were writing the stories, and of course they were important in their own right, but like Student Voice had its own publication site, so we could have ended up just publishing it on or on Student Voice and leaving it at that. But I really wanted the message to spread farther than who we could reach, because the students that we were speaking to already kind of understood the utility of this movement. And so, not being afraid to pitch to major publications, even if you don't have that many stories under your belt, or you're not published in anything necessarily major, is really important. To just like put yourself out there as a journalist is essential. And so here are 5 tips on how to pitch effectively. You want to start by always doing your research, and knowing what's in the news cycle. So this can happen in like one of 2 ways. So in this case, like, I already had written this story, and I knew that it was in the news cycle, or that it was exigent, because I was actively a part of that movement. But if you haven't written a story yet, or you're thinking about writing a story you want to pitch to someone, you should know what's going on in the news cycle, because like publications are more likely to pick up your work if it has some relation to what's already happening. And then even if you have already written for them, you should look at their website, or look at various websites or publications, to see what they're publishing at the time. So it's kind of like a delicate balance. You don't want to publish something that's like basically the exact same as something they recently published, but you also don't want to like come out of left field and they're like, yeah, we're not taking stories about that right now. Like, this is not likely to get picked up if it's not something that they're focusing on. And then also you want to do your research in learning the voice, scope, and audience of different publications. So you want to know who you're writing to. Even if you have already written the piece, you can adapt it to make it fit more of the style of whoever that publication usually works with. So of course, if it's like Teen Vogue, you're gonna write it in a manner that would appeal to teenagers, if not like teen girls possibly. But yeah, so you definitely wanna make your article or your pitch lean in a way that the editor that's reading your pitch is likely to pick it up because it goes with what they already do. And then that brings me to searching for editors. A Twitter is a really, really good tool to find editors. So basically you can just like look up the name of a publication that you want to pitch, and then like go to profiles so you can look at who has like that name in their bio. So a lot of times like editors are going to have the name of the organization that they work for in their bio. And then another like kind of like sneaky trick that you can figure out if the editor does not have their email in their bio, you can learn the email formula for different publications. So I think Allegra Kirkland is the person that I work with when publishing that story. But if they don't, like I said, if they don't have their email in their bio, you can look at kind of the what different parts go into that publication's email. So here it's like the first name and then an underscore and then their last name at theparentpublisher.com. So like it's not Teen Vogue because Condé Nast is who publishes various publications, including Teen Vogue. But just knowing what that formula looks like means that you can plug in the names of editors who don't publicly share their emails. And then when you do pitch, don't give up too much information, especially if you're still in the ideation phase. You don't want to give them like a pitch that they could also give to like a staff writer, because especially if you're trying to pitch and get money from that, then the staff writers that they already pay it's less expensive for them to just have one of them write the story that you came up with. And this happens a lot. That publications unfortunately do end up stealing a lot of pitches if people don't protect themselves adequately. And so that is an option. But also if you've already written the article, which is mostly what I do, you can also just save it as a PDF and put your watermark over it. So if you see that they published your work else on their website without taking your pitch, then you can have a case. Basically, is that like it's your work and you have a watermark on it. And then also, not every piece will necessarily get paid, and it's really unfortunate that a lot of times publications don't like to pay youth journalists. A good way of like kind of ensuring that you can get paid is joining a press corps. But if you're not in a press corps, try to negotiate payment really early on before you start working with editors and getting to the nitty gritty of things. And then also know that many publications do not pay for op-eds. So if you want a better chance at getting paid, you might want to focus on like hard reportage a little bit more. And yeah, it's a balance. It doesn't always work out, but it's probably gonna work better if you try to negotiate early on. And then lastly, just to reiterate, you want to maintain your voice. It can be really like intimidating to work with editors, especially at large publications, but everything that you write, again, is a reflection of your work, or should be a reflection of your work. And if you feel like your voice is not being adequately centered, then you should either pull out or like advocate for it to be communicated in a way that you would prefer. Okay, so actually what happened with that article for going test optional is that the UC Regents ended up removing the standardized testing requirement. Well, they're going to remove it by 2024, and they went test optional for this cycle, and I believe like the next cycle as well, or maybe all the cycles up to 2024. I can't exactly remember what decision they made, but the article that I wrote ended up being included in the public comment when the UC Regents approved that decision, which was really cool. It's a cool opportunity. And then also something else that happened from that article is that I ended up being quoted or cited in a New York Times article, which was cool. And yeah. And so learning number 6 is that your voice can help ignite a movement. Is that we were in the midst of the testosterone movement once I was writing on. That's why it was essential, or what made it so exigent. But knowing that that storytelling is increasingly playing a role in shaping movements towards change, and storytelling in a lot of different mediums. Of course, journalism is one of them. But just knowing that your voice itself is a really powerful tool. And so moving on to another opportunity where student voices really made an impact was I kind of, I guess, co-founded a movement towards defunding school police in San Diego. These are just pictures from our action that we took. It was basically just a group of students who believed that school police cause a lot more harm than good than they do in our communities, and they criminalize and marginalize predominantly Black students and Latinx students. And so we started Defund School Police SD. And it all started with a petition that we ended up getting like over 3,000 signatures, and that kind of like gained us some attention. And we also organized primarily over Instagram and virtually, which was, I think, in and of itself kind of a form of storytelling. I ran the social media, which was really cool because it helped us engage with youth across San Diego, even the folks that we didn't know personally. And so as we began organizing and making our movement public over social media, we got a lot of opportunities to speak to the press. These are I think just 4 of them, but like people were calling us like every day to get stories about the movement. And then we ended up towards the end, I think I ended up writing an op-ed with the San Diego Union Tribune about our movement, so we could actually use our own voices. It was I'm the one who like ended up writing it, but it was like definitely a collaborative thing between everyone who was organizing, all of our organizers, and it was an opportunity for us to all share what the movement meant to us in our own words, without having to negotiate the different voices that were coming in through the reportage. And so as a result of that advocacy, our school district hosted a town hall on the impacts of police violence in schools in San Diego, and then also created a task force to dismantle San Diego Unified School District's police department's involvement in school. So that was a really cool outcome from that. And that's that's the last time I did education-based journalism. I still do work at like the newspaper at my school and pitch to other publications, but I felt like that was the most relevant to this. And so hopefully we still have time for questions. Try to go fast enough to leave some time if there is.
Thank you so much. Your journey and the topics you've tackled are extremely inspiring. We just have one question in the chat, and that is, did you use Canva to make your social media videos?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. Now we can move on.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's really inspiring. And as a fellow journalist, I can say I hope to move forward, and you truly are an inspiration to the craft. So I hope that our other fellow journalists here today are inspired as I am.
So the first question we're going to ask to help you find your main idea for your article is, why is it important to diversely represent the issues you care about? Tia will prompt you guys in the chat to answer. You guys can, I don't think this is on the worksheet, so just type it in the chat, your answer to this. Okay, Cheyenne says, so that everyone could relate to what you are talking about. This is very true. People who relate can, I guess, kind of hop on your idea and help you build off of it to create change for what you are, I guess, moving towards. So that's a very good answer. Tia says we can't achieve justice for everyone until we are all represented. That is also very true and very on theme for today. Okay.
Next, we're going to be talking about how to kind of formulate an article. And this section is more about article writing. And so we're going to start off with how to write an introduction and some information about that. And you can go ahead and follow along in your worksheets that you have. So first off, we're going to be talking about why it's important to have one main idea. It's important because it focuses your work on one bigger concept and allows for like complexity, multiple viewpoints. And then also you can develop a workable thesis based off of this one main idea that you have throughout your article. So you're going to narrow it down by identifying some main areas that are associated with your topic. And you can do that also by researching for key concepts or key ideas. Okay, so now we're going to be talking about crafting a thesis. Like I said, feel free to go back and add on to your ideas. But yeah, so next we're talking about a thesis. So a good thesis statement conveys your point to the reader. It's clear, concise, and powerful, but you don't need to plan out your entire article in your thesis statement. You can show the path of logic and demonstrate the main idea of the article in your thesis. Don't try to summarize it, just get your main idea across. And you can check out the aspects of education reform document in your worksheet for focus ideas. So the next thing we're going to be talking about is why a hook is important, and how you can write a hook. So it's important because it's the opening statement of your article and grabs the reader's attention. And you need to make it interesting, so it grabs the reader's attention, like I said, and emphasize its connection to your main idea or thesis. So how can you do this? You can ask your question, ask the reader and answer the question with your essay. You can use a quote, but make sure it comes from a credible source. You can use a statistic for more informational pieces and stuff like that, but you want to make sure it's reliable again. So you can also use an anecdote, which is a short story that's personal or from an imagined scenario. So we have an example hook here, which is in 2019, approximately 56.6 million students attended elementary and secondary school in the United States. Among the 50.8 students enrolled in elementary and secondary public schools, 1.4 million were in pre-kindergarten, 3.7 million were in kindergarten, and then you would cite that with your source. And there are millions of students in the US, which means that millions of students are affected by a lack of diverse curriculum or unequal meritocracy. So that would be an example hook that you could write. Okay, so next we're going to be talking about body paragraph. So for your body paragraph, you want to have a focus paragraph for your first and second ones. So your first focus paragraph is going to be the second paragraph after the introduction, and is going to give you some background information, describe the importance of your topic, provide some research and some statistics, and establish your position of your article. And then the second, so for the focus paragraph 2, you're going to need, it's going to be your third paragraph, and you're going to add some complexity to your argument, address opposing arguments, and describe your potential impact of your argument or whatever you're saying in your article, and how your focus can be implemented. So the next thing is finding reliable evidence and sources. So credible sources mention the author by name and often cite other sources in those articles, especially when we're talking about social justice topics. Make sure that the sources are recent because there are a lot of recent developments. You want to reconsider the purpose or point of view of the author and ask if it matches up with your main idea and the focus of your body paragraphs. And if your sources are opinionated, make sure to recognize that in your article so that you're not using sources that all have the same viewpoint or have a lot of bias. And when you use a source, make sure you're copying down the link in your sourcing section of your worksheet. Okay. And our next slide, we're going to be talking about critical thinking and analysis of your sources. So in these sources, you want to present an organized and logical analysis in your article.
So you have to have the reader take something away from your commentary. That's the point of writing your article. So when you analyze a source, you want to make sure to repeat what it says or simply paraphrase and understand how it intersects with your focus of your choice of your article. So analysis is where you can make the writing yours and make sure not to use someone else's words. And you want to leave the reader with a clear impression of what you want to take away from the article. You want to review your supporting ideas, but present them in a different way. You want to make sure to use new and interesting language. And then to take your article to the next step, you can connect it to a larger theme, address the limitations of your article, or some other ways as well. And you want to make sure it is solutions-based, especially for articles on social justice. So you want to make sure there is a so what aspect to your article.
Yeah, and once again, thank you all so much for coming. I know I enjoyed it. So thank you to our keynote speaker. Thank you to everyone who led the breakout rooms. And using your voice and speaking up on important issues is so important. So if writing and journalism is your artistic medium, I highly encourage you to pursue it. And I know at Dawn, we believe that education reform is extremely important. So if you have any questions for us personally, feel free to email us at diversifyernarrative@gmail.com and follow us on Instagram at diversifyernarrative to stay updated on what we're doing.
Yeah, and the JOJ is also very excited that you guys were here. You can also reach out to us as well through info@thejournalsofjustice.org or through Instagram DMs at the Journals of Justice. So yeah, thank you very much.